All right. All right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we're going to record this as well. So if there's anything that you think you missed, you can either go to the slides, you can go to README, or you can watch the recording that we'll be posting later. So yeah, as I said before, links to slides are available at tinyurl.com/tooling-1. Please also open the link to the README and README, which is git.io/hackvim. Yeah, so basically everything we were talking about today will be on the README as well. So if you happen to fall behind anywhere, then feel free to just catch up using the README. And last but not least, we also have a membership portal attendance code for this event. So if you have an account on members.uclacm.com, then you can certainly use this to get points. I don't know if we're doing this quarter with the actual points themselves, but having them is always better than not having them, right? So, all right. Let me just type the README link as well. All right, and I think we'll be good to go. All right, Tim.
All righty. So just for a brief overview, this series that we're doing this quarter is, I mean, the best way to put it is a series about tools, but specifically software tools. If you're a CS major, you might know that we offer a class called CS35L, which attempts to like briefly teach you some of these tools of software development. But I know personally, I felt that I didn't quite have an understanding of certain tools, Vim especially, even Git. So what we're trying to do here is spread the knowledge a little bit and provide these essential skills that you can use for developing software or even writing papers in the case of LaTeX. And we're trying to like spread this information. So you can see these tools used in the industry or even used in class. So that's kind of the overarching goal of like the tooling series. So yeah, in particular, this session that we're doing today is on Vim. So you know, the next slide, Tim.
Right. So this quarter, we're going to be, as obviously, we're going to be doing our workshops on Zoom. So there are some things that we need to make clear first. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat functionality. Our mentors and our officers will be there to help you with questions. If for whatever reason you don't want to message on like the public chat, then you can feel free to message officers or mentors privately, and we will try our best to help you. And if your computer or your code is really, really broken, then we can try putting you in and a mentor into a breakout room to troubleshoot. In terms of meeting settings, everyone here, all participants besides the presenters are muted. So like the presenters can present comfortably. And we would prefer for you to close your camera. So not only are people less distracted, but also like bandwidth stuff as well. So yeah, and our workshops will be recorded as we previously said. I think ACM is trying to get it to post on the YouTube channel, so our YouTube channel, but yeah, we'll keep updated for that. That's it.
Oh, one additional thing. Sorry, Tim. I don't think we introduced ourselves. So I'm Tim Radice. I'm one of the directors of the tooling series and an officer of Hack. And Alex, if you.
Yeah, I'm Alex, and I am the other co-director of tooling series. Yeah.
All right, that's all. Tim, buddy, are you muted?
Sorry, I was just muted. But I'm the other Timothy, or Tim, but I'm Timothy Gu, and I will be presenting the Vim workshop along with Nathan.
Hi, I'm Nathan. I'm actually not an ACM, but I like Vim a lot. And I'm also a learning assistant for CS97, which is the new 35L.
All right, let's get started then. All right, so this workshop is going to be a workshop about Vim, and Vim in particular is a text editor. Now, what do we mean when we say something is a text editor? Well, the obvious answer is that, well, they let you edit text, right? And by text, we also mean code, because for most languages out there, code is written in a text-like format. But if we were to just talk about text editors really broadly, then this category also includes things like Microsoft Word, Google Docs, and other word processors as well. Many of you have also used IDEs like Visual Studio, Xcode, and IntelliJ, which all have like a very particular focus. Visual Studio for Windows, Xcode for Mac OS and iOS, while IntelliJ is mostly for Java. But we also see another interesting category of like light IDEs, if you will, including things like Visual Studio Visual Studio Code, Sublime Text, Atom, Notepad++, etc. They tend to have like pretty powerful features, but also try to stay a bit lighter and smaller than many of the heavy-duty IDEs out there.
Hey, Tim, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
It appears that we can all see your like chat window and stuff. Do you mind closing that?
Yeah, sorry. I didn't realize that was the case. Can you see?
Can you also
else?
minimize the video preview?
Yeah. I didn't know those were actually visible.
Yeah, I
But
thought
anyway.
that sounds like a bug.
Yeah. All right. Are we good? All
Yeah.
right. I'll assume we're good. Okay. And finally, we also have the terminal-based editors, which we're going to talk about today, including Vim and Emacs. So there are so many text editors out there. What exactly makes a text editor good? Well, so two rules of thumbs in particular that I feel like are very helpful to answer this question. The first is if the text editor helps you be more efficient at doing your tasks, then that text editor is certainly a very good text editor. For example, Google Docs and Microsoft Word are really good for writing English papers because they have spell checkers built in. They have built-in research tools. They have a lot of citation tools, etc. So these things are really good for writing papers, but they're not as good for writing code because they don't really have support for that. On the other hand, Visual Studio, Xcode, and other IDEs often have built-in support for compiling, running, and debugging your code. This also applies to things like Visual Studio Code, Atom, Sublime, etc. The other rule of thumb is that the best editor should also be the one you're the most familiar with. And this in particular applies to a lot of text editors we use for coding, because a lot of times these text editors have shortcuts or shorthands for doing common text operations. For example, Vim certainly has a lot of it, some of which we're going to talk about today. Emacs has its own fair share. Visual Studio has them. Sublime has them. So if you have used a text editor a lot and you know really well how to use it, then that is certainly the best text editor for you. Well, so on the flip side, there's something that does not make the text editor good that I would like to dispel today. In particular, just because someone else uses it doesn't necessarily make a text editor good. So it has come across our attention that Professor Paul Eggert in his CS97 class said, well, what's the main reason why he teaches Emacs for that class? And he said the main reason is because he uses Emacs. That's a certainly very good reason for him to use Emacs because he is very good at using it, but it may not be a good reason for other people to use Emacs, in our opinion. Okay. So today we're specifically going to talk about Vim. And Nathan, you want to talk a bit?
Yeah, so a bit about the history of Vim. Vim's been around for almost, in some form, for more than 50 years. The original version of Vim was called QED. It was made in Bell Labs along with like all the other command line tools we know. And then that became a tool called ED, and that became an editor called EX, and then we got an editor called Vi, and then we got an editor called Vim. And then we're actually going to use a special like a version of Vim called Neovim, which is to the left of Vim. So as you can see, Vim's kind of been around for a while. There's been countless generations of programmers who've used it. And so I think Vim has more ideas and has kind of had more time to fine tune the particulars of text editing more than Emacs, VS Code, Sublime, etc. It's the most popular terminal-based editor. I think every year Stack Overflow does like a survey and they find Vim's like the most popular terminal-based editor. And one of the main ideas of Vim is that you should be able to use it entirely through the keyboard. So this kind of speeds up your editing because you don't need to like mouse and select certain amounts of text. You can just keep your hands on the keyboard and move from one word to another very efficiently. So kind of bouncing off that, keeping all the movement in the keyboard, one of the main ideas of Vim is this idea of modes. So as opposed to pretty much any other text editor that you've worked with, where you can just type text and get text, Vim sort of treats the same keystrokes as having different meanings depending on these different modes you're in. So the main mode of Vim is called normal mode, and you can move around your text files in normal mode. And then if you want to insert text, you actually have to type a key to get into insert mode, and then you can start typing text like you see in the GIF above. So that main distinction it kind of distinguishes between navigating throughout a file and editing parts of a file versus actually writing text into a file. This might sound a little confusing now. It's sort of tough to explain, but we'll see it a lot more when we do the Vim tutorial. So just kind of what are the different modes? There's insert mode where you just type text like another editor. So say, for example, we type a D, you insert the character D. But in normal mode, that same D stands for delete, and that'll actually delete some text. And there's a third mode called visual mode where you can select text to either copy it or paste it or delete it in this case. So that D takes on a third meaning in visual mode.
So we know a lot of you are coming from a CS35L or CS97 background, whether you're taking this quarter or have taken it in the past. Well, so as we know, Emacs is a text editor that that is taught in those classes, and we have we've heard a lot of questions about like, so we already know Emacs, and Emacs is really similar to Vim, and that's a terminal-based editor. Why do we want to learn another text editor? So here's basically our answer to that question. It's our opinion that Vim tends to have more intuitive shortcuts than Emacs. It's much easier for Emacs for people to learn Vim than for Emacs, in my opinion. For example, I know a lot of people who have just used Emacs since 35L, but all they use Emacs for is its very basic features. They've never really advanced to the more interesting shortcuts that are in Emacs, just because it's very hard to remember them. Well, so here we have a list of certain common tasks that you do in a text editor, and also how you do those tasks in Vim and Emacs. For example, with quit the editor, in Vim it's :Q, where Q stands for quit, but in Emacs it's Control-X, Control-C. What do those like controls mean, or X and C? Well, I don't really know, and I don't think there is actually necessarily a meaning associated with these things. And you see this pattern edit. undo U, paste is P, copy is Y. If there's only one key associated with them, but in Emacs, not only do you have to press a lot more keys and find a lot more fingers to press those keys, but also it's more difficult to learn them and also to become proficient with the Emacs shortcuts. So today we'll be teaching you guys how to use Vim, and in particular, as we talked about before, we're going to be using a newer version of Vim known as Neovim. So if you guys could go to this link right here, there should be some instructions for installing Vim or installing Neovim, and yeah, so let's get to that. I'm gonna open the link here as well, and if you run into any issues, then please don't hesitate to let us know. Yeah, again, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat, and then we can take a look very soon. Okay, so one of the people asked why Neovim and not just Vim. And the main reason we're doing that is because Neovim offers a better tutorial than the regular Vim. Yeah, exactly what Nathan said. And the tutorial is what we're going to be using later today. And also, just as a signaling mechanism, once you're done installing Neovim, could you please raise your hand in the Zoom participants thing so that we know when to move on? And also, if you think you have finished installing it, but you're not sure if you actually have installed it correctly, well, so here's the instructions for actually checking if you installed it correctly. So let me exit out of here. So if you want to try to start Neovim on macOS and Linux, you can type nvim in a new terminal. And for Windows users, you can try double-clicking the nvim qt.exe file inside the bin folder inside of the zip file you just downloaded. And if you see something that says nvim is open source and distributable, etc., then that means you have done everything correctly. So for Mac users, sometimes you may see this message called updating homebrew. If that's the case, then you just have to wait a bit until it finishes updating. And then it'll actually install Neovim. That's what you want to do. Again, if you're finished installing Neovim, could you please raise your hand in the Zoom chat or Zoom participants tab? Oh, by the way, if you are using light mode terminal and you think the text is too light, then you can do this trick. You can type colon set bg equals light and then enter. And this should make the text look a lot better. I know some people have been saying in the chat that Neovim discriminates against light mode. Then that's not necessarily true. And using this should fix most of the issues you see. All right, Tim, do you think we are good to go, or do you want to wait just a bit more for people to finish installing?
I think we have a large number of people. I would say like if I think we have a large enough group of people. For the sake of time, we should probably continue.
Okay. One of the other questions we have is what is the purpose of using this colon character as a prefix? We'll get to it really soon. So stay tuned. All right. So I assume at least most of you have Neovim installed correctly by this point. And so we're going to get started actually learning Vim and Neovim. Great. Okay, so as we said before, you can start Neovim by either typing nvim in a new terminal. That's for macOS and Linux users. And for Windows users, you can double-click nvim-qt.exe inside the bin folder from the zip file you just downloaded. And once you do that, you should see something that looks roughly like this. Yeah, so if you don't see this, then please let one of us know and we can help you with it. But otherwise, we can get started actually learning it. So the first thing we're going to do is to start the tutorial by typing colon tutor, then enter. Notice that the first T is capitalized. Yeah, so, and also just as a tip, if you are trying to use nvim and look at what I'm doing at the same time, then it might be useful for you to do a split screen, so that on one half of the screen it's what I'm doing up here, and on the other half is your own Neovim or Vim window. Okay, so we can do this. Notice that the colon tutor thing will actually show up at the very bottom left corner of the screen right here. So if you see that, then you can just hit enter, and that should put you into the screen that says welcome to the Vim tutor. Okay, well, so this is actually the built-in tutorial that is part of Neovim, as we talked about. So let's just go over some of the basics with this Vim tutor thing. So it starts off by introducing you all to Vim and Neovim. So Vim is a very powerful editor that has many commands, too many to explain it in the tutor, such as this. This tutor is designed to describe enough of the commands that you will be able to easily use Vim as an all-purpose editor. It is important to remember that this tutor is set up to teach by use. That means you need to do the exercises to learn properly. If you only read the text, you will soon forget what's the most important. For now, make sure that your shift lock key is not depressed, and or caps lock on most of our computers, and press the J button key enough times to move the cursor so that lesson 0 completely fills the screen. Okay, so we see that once we get put into the tutorial, our cursor should be at the top left corner of the screen. So that's this box right here, the one I'm pointing at. That's currently occupied by a hash symbol, and you see that the color scheme looks a bit different from the rest. So if you press J, then it's going to move the cursor down, and we can move down by repeatedly hitting the button, hitting the key. And as they described first, we are supposed to hit the J key enough times to move the cursor so that lesson 0 completely fills the screen. So I'm going to move even more to the bottom so that we have lesson 0 on the screen. Okay, so lesson 0. It says, note, the commands in the lessons will modify the text, but those changes will not be saved. Don't worry about messing things up. Just remember that pressing escape and then U will undo the latest change. So this is actually super important. If you mess anything up, let's just say I press some random keys and suddenly the sentence became a bunch of random characters. And all you have to do to fix this situation is by first pressing the escape key which is usually located at the top left corner of your keyboard. So once you do that, you can then press U. And as I sort of briefly mentioned before, U stands for undo. So it's going to reverse any change I accidentally made. The other thing to remember in case something got messed up is that this tutorial is interactive, and sometimes you can hit enter on a link like this, and it's going to show you this. It's going to split your screen to two halves. It's going to have the help page and then the regular tutor. Well, if this happens, then what you can do is typing this sequence of characters into your Vim. You're going to type colon, then Q. And once you do that, you can say colon Q, enter. And then it's going to get rid of the other window over there. But if for some reason it did not fix it, let's just say I messed something up really badly. And what I'm going to do. All right, yeah, so I messed something up really badly and I don't really know what to do. And what you can do in that case is by hitting escape, as we said before, escape, and then colon Q. But instead of just saying colon Q, enter this time, you can say colon Q A, where A stands for all. Colon Q A and then exclamation mark. So, and we're going to explain what all of these things mean in just a few moments. But just know that you can fix basically everything with Vim by just saying escape colon QA exclamation mark. And of course, if you don't remember all of these tricks to fix the situations, don't hesitate to reach out to us, either me or, well, probably not me because I'm talking, but one of the mentors or Nathan. They can definitely help you figure this out. So let's just say I mess this up and I'm gonna quit all of it. So I'm gonna do colon QA exclamation mark, and that's gonna put me back to where I came from. And what I can do to restart the tutorial is by simply re-executing nvim and then colon tutor. And that's gonna put me straight back into the tutorial itself. Okay, so having said that, let's actually get through lesson 0. Okay, so it says this tutorial is interactive. If you type enter on links, then it's going to open up the help section, or you can type K on anywhere to find its documentation. Sometimes in this tutorial, you'll be required to modify lines like this one right here, that's got a little check mark on the left, or the X symbol. Once you have done the changes correctly, the X sign on the left will change to the check mark. So as we can tell, Vim is already a pretty powerful text editor. Other times, you'll be prompted to run a command. And a command takes a form colon something, and then to execute it, you press enter. Or in other cases, you might have to press a sequence of keys. I don't really know what this sequence does, and I don't think you're going to do anything as complicated as this today. But that's how Vim really works. Okay, and one other thing, notation-wise, is that the text within angle brackets or less than symbols and greater than symbols, like the enter right here, describes a key to press instead of text to type. Okay, now let's move to the next section using the J key as we mentioned before. Okay, so the first lesson is about moving the cursor around. So we already know how to move something down. That's through the J key. But in fact, we have other things too. So for navigation keys, H, J, K, L should be very close to your right hand's 4 fingers. And all of them sort of do different things. We've got a little compass right here. So it might be a bit difficult to like remember what each key does. So we also have some little hints right here. So if you just look at HJ, the L key on the other hand is on the right, so it moves things to the right. J looks like a downward arrow, so it moves things down, while K moves things up because it's the one that's left. But that's not the only way you can move the cursor around. So another way is you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard. That's usually located at the lower right corner. So you can use that too to navigate the cursor in Vim. A final way is you can use, if you have a mouse connected to the computer, which I assume most of you do, you can use the scroller on the mouse to also move the cursor around. So that's pretty neat. As we said, Vim is intended to be used with the keyboard only, but you can use it with the mouse as well. Okay, so the second thing we're going to talk about is how do you actually exit Vim. And sometimes you see a lot of jokes about like people not knowing how to exit Vim, but it really isn't that difficult. So let's get to it. So the first thing to do is always to press the escape key. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna do :Q exclamation mark, and then enter. But don't hit those keys right now because you're gonna exit out the whole editor and it may not be clear how to get back in. So let's read through the instruction carefully. Okay, so this :Q exclamation mark thing exits the editor while discarding any changes you have made. And to get back in, we can open Vim again using the way we did in the past, and get back here by executing :tutor. So once you feel confident that you have these instructions memorized, and I'm fairly certain that a lot of you are because we have done these steps in the past, then let's actually try to go do it. Okay, so we're gonna do :Q exclamation mark, and then enter. Okay, so after that happens, we're back to where we can launch Neovim again. So let's do that, and then let's open up the tutorial again by typing :tutor, and then enter. Great. Okay, so we're back here, and let's scroll to where we previously were, lesson 1.2. And yeah, that's how you exit Vim. So just to unpack a bit right here. So what does these three things actually do? And even the enter key, I guess. So the colon basically means that we're going to start typing a command. And in fact, there are different types of command in Vim, but colon starts a lot of them. So, and we also see the colon being used for the tutor as well. Now, what does a Q do? The Q, as we sort of talked about before, quits the editor. So Q stands for quit. Now, exclamation mark is there because we want to discard any changes we've made. So let's just say I tried to add something to the file and I've added a bunch of random stuff. And let's just say I want to discard any of these changes. And :Q exclamation mark allows me to exit even despite the fact that I have made changes in the file. So this is sort of similar to in like other text editors, like say Microsoft Word. If you try to close the document without saving it, it's going to ask you, hey, like, do you want to save these changes? And that's and the exclamation mark is Vim's way of saying, yes, I actually do want to quit the file without saving anything. In comparison, if I try to change a file while just saying :Q, I guess that was weird. Let me try something else. Let me try to just like change this file. And if I want to quit the Vim right here without the exclamation mark, it's going to complain. It says no write since last change. So, and in fact, it helpfully pointed out that you can add an exclamation mark to override it. So we can do that, and now Vim will let us quit the editor fully. Okay, so that was a slight detour from the lesson, but let's get back to the original. All right, lesson 1.3, and now we're actually going to start editing text, but we're not going to actually add anything right now. That's a bit unfortunate, but we'll get to it soon. All right, so it says move the cursor down, or actually before that, it says press X to delete the character under the cursor. So what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to move the cursor down to the line. It says marked with this arrow, but on Neovim, it's going to be marked with a little X symbol. So it says the cow jumped over the moon, except with a bunch of additional characters that should not be there. And our task is to use this new X key that we learned to fix the grammar and to fix the spelling. Okay, so let's first navigate using either the arrow keys or HJKL to the right. So right should be L because L is the rightmost key we have. All right, so we're going to position the cursor on top of a character that we want to delete. In this case, it's going to be a C. So we're going to click C, and then the C disappeared. Let's move more to the right and find the extraneous D. Let's get rid of it also. Extra V, extra R, extra H, and extra O. And boom, after we have done all of it, we see that the X symbol on the very left has now become a check mark, saying that we have done everything correctly. Okay, so now that this line is correct, we can go on to lesson 1.4. And also, the Vim tutorial gave us a little note that says, as you go through this tutorial, do not try to memorize and instead try to learn by usage. And it's certainly true that, when you first learn to use the computer, you don't try to memorize that, oh, to move the mouse up, I'm going to move the mouse, or yeah, if I want to move the cursor up, I want to move the mouse up. But instead, you sort of just do it, and intuitively, you're going to learn how these things work. Now, I know that Vim is much more difficult than just that, but the same principle really applies if you follow through with it. Okay, so we also have the next section, which is about insertion, which is where we can actually add text into the file. So so the first thing we're going to do is to move the cursor to the first line below, and we want to make the first line the same as the second. So and the way we do that is by using this I key. But let's not just click I like right here, because this is not where we actually want to insert the text. Instead, we're going to first move our cursor to the T in text, well, the first T in text, where we want to insert the word sum. So let's do that by pressing I. Okay, so something just happened. When I click I, on the lower left, we should see this uppercase insert text right there. And as we talked about before, Vim has generally 3 modes. We have the normal mode, we have the insert mode, and we have the visual mode. So the I key bumps us into the second mode, which is insert mode. And if you remember, in insert mode, any letter you try to type will actually get reflected in the file. So if I try to type sum now, then the sum is actually going to go onto the screen, which is pretty great after what we've done. Okay, so that will fix this. Let's use the L key to move to missing. I'm going to add a S and I from, and also line. Okay, so that's how we're going to fix this part real quick. Okay, so the I key, again, puts us into the insert mode. But it's not the only way we can go into the insert mode. So, so lesson 1.5 talks about this new thing called A, or big A, which stands for append. Okay, so so let's get to this line right here. There is some text missing from the. And what we notice here is that the thing we want to add to this line are all at the very end of the line. And using this big A thing, we can append more things onto this line. So let me do Shift A, because it's got to be the capital A. And then I can type this line or its line. Okay, that's great. Let me move back to the beginning of a line, or actually to anywhere in the line. The middle works also. And I'm going to navigate to the third line right here. And we have some more text missing here, but also at the end of the line. And we can do the same dance as before by adding the ing and here, also the period. But yeah, this trick really works everywhere. So you can even go somewhere that's not one of these marked editing area and just change things. So yeah, you can do something like that, like just added yay to the end of this line. I can repeat yes. That works also. Okay, so now lesson 1.6. So we noticed that we've done a lot of these things. We've tried to edit the text. We know how to delete the text. We also know how to quit the file without saving it. But how exactly do we actually like save the file, right? Which is like sort of the most important part of editing the text. And the answer to that question in Vim is :WQ. Before I explain what W means, let's read through the instructions here. Okay, so the first step we have to do is to exit this tutor as we did in lesson 1.2, which is :Q exclamation mark. But there's also this or if you have access to another terminal, do the following there. So so for Mac and Linux users, you can create a new terminal very easily by just on Mac it's going to be Command T, and on Linux is usually Control Shift T. On Windows, you don't really have a terminal just like per se. So what you can do is you can open up another. Just launch the nvim qt.exe file again. And once you do that, okay, so that's the first step right here. The second step is at the shell prompt, type this command, nvim tutor. So for Windows users, unfortunately, you don't have a shell where you can do this. So instead, what we're going to do is instead type the following. You're going to say :E tutor, then enter. So again, for Linux and Mac OS users, you can open up a new shell and type nvim tutor. But for Windows users, what you're going to do is you're going to open up nvim qt.exe again, and then in there you can type :E tutor and then enter. And there should be a space between E and tutor. Okay. So after that, we're going to insert and delete text as we've learned in previous lessons. And finally, save the file with changes and exit Vim with :WQ. And then implicit there is the enter that we also always have to type after trying to run the command. So if we have quit Vim tutor in step 1, we can restart Vim tutor and move down to the following summary. But because we don't have to do that, we can actually just come back to this window later. All right, so I'm going to make a new terminal, which is what macOS and Linux users will do. So, and then I can do what we said above, which is nvim then tutor. So tutor will refer to the file that we want to edit. In this case, the tutor file actually does not exist, but nvim tutor plus the save action we're going to do later will create the file for us. Actually, let me get rid of the file first. All right, so Vim tutor. All right, so we should see at the bottom left corner that that tutor shows up there. And this is Vim's way of telling us what file we're editing. And if we go back to the Vim tutor, we can actually see that the file being edited is somewhere confusing, because that's where the tutorial is located. But in our case, it's just tutor because it's we just made this file and it should be pretty simple. All right, so we can't really delete text if we don't have text here to begin with, but we can certainly try to use the commands we just learned, including I, big A, and X, to try to add things to it. And also the movement commands we learned, which is H, J, K, and L. So I'm just gonna do something random here. I can write some C code int main char star argv, and I can write hello world, new line, and then I can write that. Oh, and also to start a new line, you can just say in insert mode, you can just say enter. That's just gonna start a new line. Yeah. Again, in order to use any of these commands, I, A, and X, you have to get back into normal mode. So let's just say I want to add something else to the end of a line, and currently I'm in insert mode. So that means if I type anything, it will show up on the screen. So let's just say I'm trying to do big A right now, and that's actually just going onto the screen itself. But if I want to use the big A command to append things onto this line, then what I'm gonna have to do is escape and then big A. And then I can add stuff. 1 + 1 is equal to the value of 1 + 1. And then I can return 0. And some other cool features in Vim that we might not get to later today is, for example, this thing called visual block mode. So you can actually add things to the beginning of many lines at the same time. Let's just say I want to comment out all these lines because they're not valid C code. And what I can do is to just go into visual block mode, adding these things, and they become comments. This thing is also super handy if you want to adjust indentation. So right here, I have 4 spaces of indentation, but let's just say I want to get them down to 2. So what I can do is using X one at a time. But even cooler is we can do this thing called visual block mode and just delete those 6 characters, those 6 spaces at the same time. There's also pretty other cool things in Vim, like you can, so I'm sure a lot of you coming from other editors might have used syntax highlighting before, which is this thing that basically shows the different parts of a source file in different colors, and it generally helps understanding. Well, you can do that here too. So I'm gonna do something that y'all may not need to know. But once I do this, then that shows up as proper C code, where ints are highlighted, return also highlighted. And if I do include, for example, I can include stdio.h, which brings in the printf function, and everything seems to be highlighted correctly. All right. I'm going to assume that most of you have been able to play around with it with these commands that we just learned, and now is the time to save. So again, we can do :WQ and then enter. Again, you have to get into the normal mode for this to work. So if you're in insert mode, then it's going to show up as just :WQ on the screen. So again, to get back, you have to hit escape, then :WQ, and enter. And this time, we are back to where we were. But if we were try to open this file again by using nvim tutor, then what we see is that the file is still there. Now the syntax highlighting is not there anymore because it's a setting we applied just in the last instance of Vim. But we'll talk about things that you can do in the future to configure Vim to do these things automatically. But yeah, so that totally works. For Windows users, you might have to use to open up the folder in Windows in order to see the file, because you can't just type nvim tutor in a shell. If I remember correctly, the file should be in either in the bin folder or in the neovim zipped folder that you downloaded off the web. But yeah, if everything seems to work, then yeah, that's how they're supposed to do. That's how they're supposed to be anyway. Okay, so I promised to explain what exactly this WQ thing is, so I'm going to do that right now. Again, colon will give us the chance to do certain commands, and W here means write. And so combined, WQ just means write and quit, which totally makes sense compared to what was it for Emacs? Control X, Control C. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So once we have done all of this, it's time for a little lesson 1 summary. So the first things we learned were that to move the cursor, we can use either the arrow keys or HAKL. But I also mentioned that you can navigate using the mouse scroller as well. So many ways. To start Vim from the shell, or Neovim in our case, you can just type nvim then file name. For Windows users, you can do that as well if you have set up things properly. But that's a bit outside the scope of what we're doing today. So as an alternative, you can open up the Neovim editor, then do :E file name as well. To exit Vim, you can type escape, then :Q exclamation mark to discard changes. Alternatively, you can also type :WQ instead if you want to save the changes to the file. Another thing we learned was that to delete the character at the cursor, you can type X. And why is it X? Because X is, X. I want to cross something out. So that's where it came from. And finally, we learned 2 additional ways of inserting or appending text, including which appends text to the end of a line, or I, which just allows you to start editing right there. And finally, just as we mentioned before, Vim has different modes of editing the file. So I and A will give you the insert mode, while normally you're in the normal mode. So to get into the insert mode, you can use I or A, or as we'll learn later, some other keys as well. But to get out of normal mode, you have to do escape. So that's why we always encourage people to do escape if you think you messed something up, because if you're in insert mode, and then things like :Q won't work because they'll just show up in the file. If you have partially completed commands that you accidentally typed, then pressing escape will also discard those, which is good, which is very good actually. Seeing them like visual block and other things and syntax highlighting, but that's not it. We have for a lot of you, you might be familiar with auto-completion in certain languages, where you type something and it's going to automatically fill out the rest of what you're trying to type. Well, those things exist in Vim as well. So let me try to create a JavaScript file. And if you don't know JavaScript, that's totally fine. I'm just here to try to demonstrate some of its features. So I can create a new, actually, you know what? I'm not going to do this right now because some of my configurations have been disabled for the purpose of this workshop. But let me restore it real quick. Okay, so you can also change this color scheme if you think the original is a bit not unattractive. I agree with you. But anyway, you don't have to agree with me in if this is attractive or not. But anyway, so you see that in my configuration, when I start typing something, then it's automatically going to complete certain things that I might want to type. So in this case, I'm going to create a new array and an empty array, and I can add things to it. And here, in fact, you see that things are automatically completed. And whoa, there's this thing up above that tells me what each function does. So I can push something in there. I can pop something out. I can do console.log, which prints the content of the array out to the console. I can also make a function, and all it does is print out console.log hello world, and also call the function. Yeah, so a lot of features. Now I want to change the name of this array variable. Well, I can easily do that by actually selecting these things, and I'm going to substitute the array name with just ARY if I want to. And Vim gives you a way of trying to confirm each selection. Let's just say I want to change the array variable only for the push and the console.log, but not change the pop. So I can do that very easily right here. I can also undo and redo. I know you haven't learned redo yet, but you will soon, hopefully. And yeah, so yeah, there's so many more features in Vim that I can't even begin to go over. And the other thing I want to point out is that the thing with Vim and other full-featured text editors is that very rarely are you going to actually learn all the features in the text editor. Eventually, what people end up doing is that they'll just learn the shortcuts that make them efficient at what they're doing. So for example, if you write a lot of English things in Vim, then let's just say I want to write a huge paragraph, and if I write a big paragraph, then of course it will show up something like this in a single line. But if I don't want to do that, and I want to do what we call rewrap these lines into a nice little paragraph, then I can do that easily with this shortcut right here, which will wrap these things. What if I want the line to be shorter? So I can set the text width to be, say, 60 characters instead. I can reselect this whole thing and rewrap it. And I use a shortcut to do that as well. So if you don't write as much English or documentation or documents in Vim, then you might not find these things to be useful. For example, if I do use the same trick here, I guess that's pretty useful, huh? But maybe not here. If I do that, then it looks ugly and not what I want to do in the first place. So yeah, that's sort of the philosophy of Vim. You have a lot of features, but you don't necessarily need all of them. All right, and I'm going to exit out of this file by using the trick we learned in the past, which is :q exclamation mark, and that will discard the changes I made to that file. And I will turn off my configurations for now. Okay, so this is it in terms of the guided tour portion of Vim Tutor. And what we want to do in the next hour is to just sort of explore more of the Vim Tutor, including deletion commands and and other things that's still in the document. And what we're going to do is we're just going to let you all loose so you can do those things by yourself at your own pace. And in about half an hour or so, we're going to bring everyone back, and we have some additional topics to talk about in Vim. But before we set you all loose, we just have a little poll that we want to show you guys, just to gauge. Okay, so I'm going for this poll, and if things go right, you should be able to see that this. All right, I'm gonna check if I have any questions in chat. Sorry, is there a question for me? If so, can one of the mentors just shout it out?
Will you be covering copy paste?
So I personally will not be covering copy paste, unfortunately. It is included in the Vim tutorial though. So if you go down to where do they mention paste? Aha, here. So lesson 3.1. You talk about the put command, and that's essentially how you you paste things. So I can just give you a little tutorial on what to do. So you can select. So let's see. Do they talk about visual mode yet? No, they do not. Anyway, so they do talk about deleting a whole line. So we can actually do that also. So let's just try to cut this line by using DD. So that'll make this line disappear. But I can easily paste it back by using P. And in fact, I can go somewhere else and paste it there as well. And yeah, so P command pastes. In fact, I don't know if they talk about it either, but if so, P will paste the line under the current line. But if you want to paste the line above the current line, then you can do big P. And yeah, that's pretty neat. So yeah, in the slides, we also talked about another possibility, which is to copy a line right here. So we know that to delete, it's W, or it's D, because D for delete. But for copying, it's going to be Y. So what we can do is, instead of doing DD, which deletes a line, we can say YY, which copies this line. Then I can make many copies of it. Yeah. Does that answer the question? I guess I can't really know, but. All right. Yeah, so feel free to start exploring more of a Vim tutorial on your own, and we'll be here to answer any questions you have.
Another one of the questions that was in the chat. By default, does Vim have all of the weird Emacs electric keyboard stuff disabled?
What exactly are the weird Emacs electric keyboard stuff? I'm not super
sure.
familiar, unfortunately. I guess I can Google what it is. That is not what I wanted. So it seems like what they're saying is that this what does this thing, does it just make like a pairing? Okay, so I've just had issues where I can never insert a closing parent. Ah, okay, so by default, Vim does not do that. as you can tell, it just doesn't. Like you can make as many ending parentheses as you want. However, many of us do have extensions that that will modify this behavior. For example, I use something called a peer tree. So let me re-enable my own settings again. So in my configuration, I can, add as many parentheses as I want, and they're all going to be correctly paired. I can type something, and in this case, yes, indeed, I cannot type additional parentheses, but there are workarounds. And for example, you can type a space and put something to the left of that, and then delete the space. But all of this is pretty personal to you, and even the extension I use have configurations that that allow you to modify this behavior. Oh yeah, just as an additional resource, in Vim, you can access the help of Vim and Neovim by using the :h command. So you can do :h and then whatever thing you want to get help on, or well, help, H stands for help. So for example, if I want help on this extension I have, I can do h peer tree, and that's going to give me some configuration on, or give me some help on peer tree. So so yeah, if I go to right here, so there are some options called smart closer, for example, which may just be yeah, okay. So that's what the setting is actually. So if you're not satisfied with the current settings, then you can certainly go ahead and tweak that. Okay, so I think the rule in peer tree is that if it's imbalanced, like if I have too many opening parentheses, then I can close all of them out without making the thing do nothing. But now all the parentheses are balanced. So if I try to type more ending parentheses, then it's not going to let me, which I'm pretty happy about, because I've never really had too much issue with it. But maybe Emacs just isn't smart. So let's see. Ian asked, how do you get the code line numbers to be relative to your cursor? Okay, so I see Jody has already answered. Yes, that's set relative number. And that's why I have enabled myself. So I can look at these things. And why would you ever think that's helpful? Well, in fact, as it turns out, in Vim, you have many navigation features, like say 3J, which just means do J 3 times. So if I want to do like 3 lines above, then I can do 3K, and that's pretty helpful. And in those cases, the relative numbering is much more useful than the absolute numbers. Okay. Kevin Tan says, write us a scheme program. Oh, actually, before that, how do you unset relative number? Well, to unset any of these, you can just do set no whatever. So no relative number gets rid of relative number. Yeah. So yeah. You can also do set number, which gives you absolute numbering, and you can even do set number and relative number, which gives you a mix of both. Yeah. So here we see that the absolute number is where I'm currently at, and the relative numbers is everywhere else. I don't like this though, it's too distracting, so I don't do that. Some people like it. Vim is all about configuration. Elena says, oh, camel, please. So I basically have to choose between scheme and oh, camel. I personally prefer oh, camel a lot more, just because it's more mathy, I guess, but that's very much a personal opinion. Yeah. I don't really have an interesting OCaml program to write, unfortunately. So in fact, I'm just going to write something that in fact will never, will always do something. Yay, that's my OCaml program. All right, so if you have relative number on, how can you jump to a line outside of what you can see? So in essence, you can't. If I don't know where to go, then I don't know how to get there. That's sort of the principle. However, if you think that like these J's and K's are too slow, then you can all page down, or you can do Control U, which stands for up, and Control down, which stands for down. So that may be helpful as well. Oh yeah, another reason why I don't use the absolute numbering system is because I can easily see which line number I'm at just by going to the bottom right corner and see 200. Well, so that means I'm at line 200 in the file. All right. Nathan says left pad. So I am to write a left pad program. I don't want to do an OCaml though, because I don't like doing strings OCaml. All right, JavaScript it is. Left pad. So left pad will take a string and also a number. And what it's going to say is console.log, I spent a long time writing this function, and time is money. So I request you. So in order for this function to work, you must pay me this particular number amount. In fact, I'm going to, yep, so that's my left pad function. And I am going to indent things nicely so that people reading my code are happy. They probably won't be, but for different reasons. But yeah, so that's a left pad function right there. Yeah. Let's see, anything else? Can I repeat the command for word wrap? So word wrap itself is going to be GQ. Let me try to get a long paragraph ready. So, and also it even works in comments if you're writing computer code. So I'm going to make many copies of this. And so what I'm going to write is GQ. That's actually shown right here on the bottom right corner. And then what I'm going to do is, so GQ stands for word wrap, but it doesn't, we have to specify which section to wrap. And to do that, I'm going to say IP, which means inner paragraph, which just means the current paragraph I'm currently in. So if I do that, then it's going to rewrap all of these things I just wrote. But let's just say I want to only rewrap these lines. So you can go into visual line mode, which is big V, which is one of the types of visual modes. Then you can select this and type GQ, and that's going to work as well. The set something I mentioned was just to change how long a line is supposed to be. So by default, I think text was set to 78 or something. But let's just say I'm a fan of big lines, long lines. I'm going to say each line is going to be 100 characters. So I'm going to say :set space TW equals 100. And once I do that, if I do GQIP again, then that's going to make the lines a lot longer. Let's restore it back to 0, which I believe is the default value. And GQIP gives me shorter lines. What's my least favorite aspect of Vim? That's a difficult question. I actually have to think about it for a bit. It just feels so natural these days. Like I don't like it's like asking what's your least favorite aspect about breathing. You don't think about these questions. You just do it. I guess the only thing that I'm not as happy about it is the built-in integration for auto-completion. Unlike in Visual Studio Code, you can literally just install extension and expect it to work. In Vim, sometimes you do have to tinker around a bit just to make sure that things work. And this particularly applied to my 132 project when I was using Java for the program, because we have to use Java, and it took me quite a while to get the auto-completion working. Matthew says Emacs blah 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 backspace 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 greater than VI. I unfortunately do not agree. It says CP Emacs VI. Let me try that. CP Emacs VI. All right, in fact, that's an error because we can't find Emacs on my system. However, what we can do is we can do Vim CP which Emacs or which and Vim to Emacs. And once I do that, I can say Emacs and that will get me to Vim. So that's pretty awesome. Is there any actual questions that I missed? So someone asked, what does FT stand for? So that was referring to when I was writing some C code in this tutor thing. So usually what happens is that Neovim is going to try to figure out what this file is supposed to be by inferring the file type from the extension. So for C file, usually you'll have tutor.c. But in this case, we don't have this .c extension. So we have to manually teach Vim or Neovim what this file is supposed to be. So that's what we did by doing set ft equals c. So we're setting the file type to be c. So I just explained this file type thing to you. And also you can actually expand it out. You can say set file type as well. ft just an alias for the file type option. But in the future, if you install something online and you don't know what it does, well, so there's always the help thing I just mentioned. You can do :h, then file type, or even ft, and it's going to show you when this option is set. The sometimes it's a bit dense, but basically it sets while the value of file type is used in place of the file name to figure out the file type. So that sort of makes sense. But unfortunately, a lot of times these documentation is not the most beginner friendly, unfortunately. So in those cases, it's much more useful to use something called Google. So you can say Vim ft option, and in fact it says what's the difference between set ft and set file type. Then so set file type does not override the existing file type, while set ft does, and it just sets a file type. All right. So yeah, had I renamed tutor to tutor.c, then I would not have to do this as expected. Yeah. So Elena said, I hate Google. That's really funny considering that Elena is actually going to be working for Google. Tim says git good is not a git command. Well, you can actually easily make one. So let's just make one right here. I'm going to say bin get good, and it's going to say something really sweet. It's first of all, it's going to use the shell as the interpreter. It's going to say echo, you already are smiley face. So once I have this, I can do get good, and unfortunately it doesn't work. Let me try to fix that. That's a bit unfortunate. Schmod bin. Also, this is not part of the curriculum. You don't have to know what this is. Although eventually you might have to learn it, unfortunately. Anyway, now it says, when I do get good, it says you're the R, which is pretty great. Elena says, Tim, what's your favorite Vim command? I think it's :Q because it's one of the most difficult to learn. But actually, no, just kidding. I think my favorite is probably the text wrap because by the number of hours that command has saved me from having to realign everything manually, it's probably the best command by that one measure. So yeah, that's my answer. Let's see. So this autocomplete thing that I was demonstrating before, it is something I personally installed. However, so this thing is something I installed. However, a lot of auto-completion features actually exist without any plugins. So let me get back here where I don't have any plugins enabled. And for example, I want to type the word deletion, but I'm lazy. And I just type del. And what I can do is actually Control-N, which will look for every word that starts with del in the file. And indeed, we just end up with 2. And there's deletion and delete. And deletion, the first one. So that's what we're going to pick. It's called Control-N unintuitively because N stands for next. So you're trying to find the next option, so to speak. Yeah, another one that might be helpful, but only after a while, is what if you want to combine these 2 lines together? So you can do something like GQ and set the text width to be really big, but a much easier way would probably just be doing Shift J, where J stands for join, and that will basically join these 2 lines together, adding a space in between. And in fact, J is pretty smart. So if you do it in a text file, it's going to add a space. But on the other hand, if you do it in a, let's just say, scheme file, because I know that's something that's taught at UCLA, let's just say define a function. And I'm going to return 1. Actually, maybe a bit more. Let A be 0 or be 1. And then I'm going to return A. Let's just say your code looks like mine, and it's very much not very clean and well indented. So let's just say you have something like this, and you want to combine all of these parentheses onto the same line. And J in this case will actually do that for you without adding spaces in between. So that's pretty smart. I don't know if it's going to do it here. In fact, it will. Well, that's pretty smart. Nice job, Vim. So yeah, J is pretty intelligent. Let's see, anything else that's cool that I know? Why are people talking about Emacs so much? There isn't much point in talking about that thing, considering we clearly see the superiority of Vim. JK, just kidding. If you're good at Emacs, you're probably a genius, which sort of reflects on the fact that Emacs is, in my opinion, difficult to learn. Anyway, I think that's it. Yes. Oh yeah. The other thing about Emacs is that you actually get like a full Emacs Lisp interpreter, so you can write like full scale programs like a web browser in it. Usually you don't do that in Vim because Vim isn't really designed for that, and honestly Emacs isn't designed for that either, but people just do it because they think it's fun. But yeah, Emacs people are weird. How many hours do you think you've spent customizing your Vim? For Nathan, it's probably too many. For me, not as many. I'm a strong believer in minimal customization. For example, I don't have like fancy shortcuts that's not in Vim already. The main reason for that is historically I have been quite error prone and have broken my system more than once. And what that leads to is that I spend all this time customizing Vim and forget to save the final version somewhere, and then my system crashes and I will never see the configuration files ever again. So I've learned my lesson, and yeah, so that's why my configuration is actually fairly small. I can show you guys it actually. Let's just go to config Neovim init. So this is just copied off somewhere. I can do without it. This is also copied off. These are the plugins I use, which is like not a lot compared to a lot of people. So what is this? 9, 10, 11. That's like 11. Yeah. And also some other things that I can do without, like auto completion, sort of useless. Just kidding. Peer tree. I mean, I can just not be lazy and type out all the parentheses myself. These things are pretty basic. Also, color scheme. Oh yeah. A final cool thing about Vim is that like, if you're on Windows, you can actually use your mouse and click on something, and it will just automatically like put the cursor there, which is actually pretty helpful. However, for Mac and Linux users, you might have to like manually enable it by doing :set mouse equals A, and that's going to enable support for these things. Yeah, that's like one of the only important things I have in here. Nathan says, Tim, that sounds like a problem Git could solve. Well, guess what? When, I have more recently, in the grand scheme of things, started to back up my configuration files in Git. So thanks for that tip. Tim says, Racket lol. Yeah, in fact, not only do I have Racket, I also have OCaml, which is pretty great. In fact, I just wrote some Racket code today for one of my classes. That's not 131. So there's that. Fun fact, at Waterloo, they teach intro CS in Racket. I also heard that at Berkeley or something, they teach like writing a, what do you call it? A scheme interpreter, and Racket is a dialective scheme. Interesting factoids. All right, I will take a short break, and I'm sure the other mentors will be more than happy to answer your questions. So I will stop my video and mute myself right now. All right, everyone. So it's been 40 minutes since we first started to let you guys explore some more stuff on your own. So we do have some additional material just to get through. So yeah. Before doing that though, let's see. So I'm gonna pull out this poll for let's see. Apparently I have to end poll and go to the next one. All right. All right. Well, we see that most of you have gone beyond lesson 2 at least. That's good. Yeah. So Nathan, would you like to do some of the next, some of the last few slides? Is Nathan here?
Oh, I think he can't unmute himself. Hold on, let me get him.
Hello. Yes, I'm here now.
Oh no, you got it. Okay.
Thank
I don't know why
you.
you're not a. This doesn't
Yes.
really matter.
So where to go after Vim Tutor? When you work your way all the way through Vim Tutor, we have a README for this workshop. You should go check it out. There are a lot of good resources in there. You can read the built-in Vim documentation. Like Tim said, it's like not the most beginner-friendly, but sometimes it's pretty useful. There's a great site called Vimcasts that has a lot of Vim screencasts, and I think they're super like beginner friendly. There's a site called Vim Golf that is exactly what it sounds like. You try and complete challenges using the least amount of Vim strokes possible. And the main thing to just get better at Vim is to use it every day, and you'll find yourself kind of picking up new commands and figuring out how to do things that you previously didn't know. So stick with it and you'll become Tim Go. And Tim kind of touched on this, but going over it again, kind of configuration in Vim. So unlike editors like VS Code, where you're kind of configuring everything in JavaScript or like GUI settings, in Vim, there's a full-blown programming language called VimScript. The main file is your Vim RC, or in Neovim, it's this nvim init.vim file. And the main way to you kind of pick up configuration things, I think, is just kind of peeking at other people's Vim configuration files on GitHub and like Googling random settings. Some common ones you might be interested in, line numbers. There's a way to do an interactive find and replace that's super nice. You can use spaces instead of tabs, or you can have mouse support. And we linked to my Vim config or Tim's or some other people on GitHub if you're interested in checking those out later. And as Tim mentioned also, there are lots of plugins, so you can do crazy things in Vim. You can make your Vim look like that. There's a great site called Vim Awesome that has a list of Vim plugins, and it's sorted by popularity, so you can kind of see what people are using. We also listed some in our README. I know Tim recommended Pear Tree, and you can also look at Unix porn for inspiration.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Please fill out this feedback form for us. I know it's hard to type, so that's what I'm gonna. Well, someone's probably got it. But yeah, please fill out this feedback form for us so that we both know how we did this time and we know how to improve for future workshops. because again, this is a quarter-long thing, this the tooling series for from ACM Hack. So we will definitely like to know what we did well and what we didn't do well. And considering that this is the first time we've done these Zoom things in the entire history of ACM Hack, we will definitely like to know that is there something else, is there something we could have done better with these things? So yeah, did someone post in the chat?
Yeah, I just did.
All right, cool. Let me add the HTTPS as well to make it more copy pastable. There we go.
Mhm. All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. The next one's going to be about Git, so that's definitely not one to miss. It's probably one of the most useful programming tools. So yeah, and yours truly will be teaching that one. So yeah, when it come out next week, it'll be on Zoom as usual. So yeah, I hope to see you guys there, or see you guys figuratively.
See you later.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming, everyone.